Okay, this section is going to be talking all about graphing linear equations. And we're going to be talking about two variables generally because we have x and a y. Now, we just talked about how to plot points, how to label points. We talked about the x and the y axis system. By talking about all of that, and once we understand it all, then life gets much, much more exciting math-wise. Okay, let's walk into this sort of slowly here. What if I asked you to give me two things that multiplied together, or not multiplied, that added together to get 0? Could you give me two things? Well, it's kind of hard for me to hear what you're saying, right? Because we're on this video. So what if I threw out some? Maybe like 5 and -5. Wouldn't those two things add together to get 0? Sure they would. Well, what about -5 and 5? Absolutely, because remember, addition is commutative. Doesn't matter what order you do it in, you still get the same answer, right? So 5 plus -5 would be 0. -5 plus 5 would be 0. Well, what about, I don't know, 2 and -2? Would that give me 0? Sure it would. So would -2 and 2, right? If I added those things together, I would get 0. Aha. Well, if we're looking at an equation, what I just said here, two things that add together to get 0, looks like this as an equation. We are adding two different numbers to end up with 0. Well, we could plug these in. We could say 5 plus -5 equals 0. Well, remember whenever we talked about points a while ago, we said that all points come in the form of x comma y. So when I used 5 and -5, that's like saying the point where x is 5, y is -5, and according to this equation, if I add these two things together, I should get 0. And that's true. We also did up here, -5 plus 5 gives us 0. We said 2 and -2 gave us 0, or -2 and 2 gives us 0. Well, let's just try plotting these points and see what they look like. 5, -5 would be right there. Remember, we always plot the x direction first and then the y direction. Then the point -5, 5, let's plot that. So -5, +5 would be right there. The point 2, -2 would be 2, -2 right there. And -2, 2 would be -2, +2 would be right there. Now, what do you notice about those points? Those look like they lie all along the same line, don't they? I could really draw a line through all of those points. That is exactly what happens. X plus y equals 0 is called a linear equation because it forms a line. That's where, part of the word linear is line. This also demonstrates that there are a whole bunch of things that we can add together to get 0. In fact, every single point along this line has to work in the equation x plus y equals 0. It's like this is the picture and this is the name of the graph. It's like looking at my picture and saying, well, that's Teresa. Okay, let's take a point here. There's a nice point. Let's label that point. That would be in the x direction, we'd go -4, and in the y direction, we'd go +4. So, does that work in the equation? -4 plus 4 is in fact 0, isn't it? What about this point right here? This would be the point 6, -6. If I add those up, I get 0 also. Every single point along this line works in this equation.